What's up, everyone? Yeah, I know, I sound a little different today. Let's just say my usual voice called in sick, so we're rolling with this one for now. Don't worry, same chaos, different sound, let's get into it. This isn't your typical reincarnated as a villain story. Well, actually, it kind of is. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we dive into the chaos, let's set the stage. Meet Kim Woo-jin, a game developer who has spent the last few weeks locked in a battle of wits, not against a player, not even against a boss character, but against the most fearsome enemy of all, a stubborn, game-breaking bug. It's the middle of the night, and Woo-jin has finally slain his digital nemesis. The bug is gone, the code is clean, and Decalain von Grahanjuklan, the arrogant mid-boss of the game, is now fated to die no matter what path the player chooses. Good riddance. Woo-jin leans back in his chair, exhausted but victorious, when suddenly, an unwelcome guest makes her grand entrance, his ex-girlfriend. Oh, and did he mention she's also the team leader? Their relationship was once promising, but as it turns out, opposites don't attract, they collide. She was a relentless workaholic. Woo-jin was a legendary procrastinator. While she climbed the corporate ladder, he was busy falling asleep at his desk. Naturally, it didn't work out. She moved on, 6 months ago to be precise, and rumor has it, she's already found someone new. Not that Woo-jin cares. Nope, not at all. Totally indifferent. As she peers over his shoulder at the game screen, she casually drops a bombshell. Decalain's character was based on him. Personality, skills, even his ridiculous level of arrogance, it all screamed Kim Woo-jin. Before he can process this horrifying revelation, she notices her boyfriend waiting outside and exit stage left. Woo-jin, left alone with his unwanted digital doppelganger, spends the next few hours obsessively tweaking Decalain's stats. And then, like the god of creation that he is, he bestows upon his villain a few harmless buffs: comprehension, Midas touch, sharp eyesight, and iron will. Just some fun little extras. Nothing overpowered. Probably. Then realization strikes. Maybe, just maybe, he went a little overboard. Not wanting another headache before the game's launch, he prepares to nerf Decalain back into oblivion. But just as he's about to fix it, his phone pings. A message. Look outside. He does. And that's when he sees it, a gaping hole in the sky. Then comes the lightning. The next thing Woo-jin knows, he's no longer Kim Woo-jin. He's Decalain von Grahanjuklan, a man universally despised, fated to die, and stuck in the middle of a game world designed specifically to make his life miserable. A few days pass. Reality sinks in. This isn't a fever dream, nor is it some kind of afterlife punishment for ignoring his deadlines. He is, without a doubt, Decalain. And if that isn't bad enough, the first thing to greet him in this brave new world is his no-nonsense half-sister, Yariel van Grahanjuklan. She storms into his room with a glare that could freeze hell itself, scolding him for locking himself away like a lovesick fool instead of doing his job. That job? Being a distinguished professor. She dumps a mountain of documents onto his desk, mutters something about upholding the family name, and stomps off. Woo-jin Decalain stares at the paperwork, his past self screaming internally. This is bad. This is really bad. He may have been a decent game developer, but a professor? In magic? At one of the most prestigious universities in the empire? Yeah, no. The only thing he ever taught was how to speedrun an all-nighter with instant ramen and caffeine. Still, ignoring his duties isn't an option. A notification pings in front of him, the game's system now dictating his life. Main quest, become indispensable to the world. Side quest, deliver a lecture. Reward, 0.5 store currency. Woo-jin immediately recognizes the stakes. If he wants to survive, he has to make himself valuable. And if that means playing the role of Professor Decalain, then so be it. Besides, if he's going to be thrown into this mess, he might as well take advantage of the cheat abilities he programmed into himself. The comprehension skill alone should make teaching a breeze. Changing into formal attire, he's surprised by how natural it feels. The stiffness of nobility, the air of dignity. Decalain's body carries itself with effortless grace. It's almost too easy. Even his usual casual speech patterns feel stifled, as if his body physically rejects the idea of speaking like a commoner. Fantastic. He's not just Decalain in appearance, his instincts are shifting too. As he heads toward his carriage, he finds a young assistant waiting nervously by the door. The boy stammers out a greeting and hands him a stack of papers, revealing himself to be Decalain's secretary. Woo-jin casually thanks him, only to feel a wave of nausea. That's new. His body physically rejects basic politeness. That's how much of a garbage human Decalain was. Fantastic. The boy, clearly thrown off by the rare show of gratitude, gapes at him like he's just seen a unicorn. Even the carriage driver subtly glances back, clearly wondering if their employer has been replaced by a pod person. Woo-jin sighs. This is going to be rough. After a short, awkward ride, they arrive at the university. It's exactly as he imagined. Massive, bustling, full of privileged young nobles who have never worked a day in their lives. As he steps into the lecture hall, the students quiet down, watching him with anticipation. Apparently, Decalain was rumored to be a spell interpretation genius, a former prodigy with unmatched theoretical knowledge. Wu Jin exhales. Time to see if his comprehension skill really works. With a confident stride, he steps forward. Let's begin. Decalain von Grehen Oiklein finally strides into the lecture hall, commanding immediate silence with nothing but his presence. With a lazy flick of his wrist, he introduces himself as the head professor of the university's prestigious magic tower. The female students practically swoon. Tall, imposing, and exuding effortless charisma, Decalain is a walking aristocratic fantasy. However, not everyone is enchanted. One student in particular remains immune to his so-called charm Ephraim. To her, Decalain isn't just some professor. He's the villain who stole everything from her family. 3 years ago, Ephraim's father, a dedicated scholar of spell interpretation, took his own life. His groundbreaking research was extorted from him, leaving him in utter despair. And the man who took credit for it? None other than Decalain, the so-called genius spell interpreter. Stripped of her home, status, and father, Ephraim vowed to bring Decalain down. She clawed her way into the Empire's Royal University, determined to expose him for the fraud he was. But she knew she had to be patient. Revenge is best served meticulously. Meanwhile, Decalain begins his lecture, delving into the fundamentals of magic, the 3 major attributes, and 9 types of spells. Attributes serve as the origin of magic, while elements form the world's building blocks. The spell classifications include summoning, spirit magic, destruction, support, enchantment, manipulation, ductility, bewitchment, and harmony. As Wu Jin, now Decalain, lectures, he realizes something peculiar. Teaching is absurdly easy. Despite never studying magic theory before, his comprehension skill deciphers everything flawlessly. Even Decalain's natural air of superiority helps. His poise, calculated eye contact, and refined speech hold the students captive. For the first time, Wu Jin considers that maybe, just maybe, this body was designed for this role. He continues explaining mana storage. Mages store it in their heads for spellcasting efficiency, knights store it in their hearts for physical augmentation, and those with an inner core can harmonize internal and external mana, making them the most versatile. He almost laughs at the irony. Here he is, lecturing about talent and training, yet his own mana pool is pathetically small. The average elite mage boasts 30,000 mana, while he's stuck with a measly 3,500. Talk about humiliating. Wrapping up, Decalain hesitates before reading the final scripted line. If there are any questions. He prays no one has any, but of course, Ephraim stands up. With a steely glare, she brings up a strange spell recently discovered in the dormitories, rumored to be the work of the devil. Before answering, Decalain chastises her for failing to introduce herself, a classic noble power move. The students snicker as Ephraim stiffens with humiliation. Seeing her falter, he turns to leave, masking his real reason. He's running low on mana. His comprehension skill guzzles energy, and he's down to a critical 2,000. But Ephraim persists. The magic tower refuses to investigate the spell, dismissing it as a rumor. If Professor Decalain is as brilliant as people claim, surely he can identify it. To prove her point, she casts the spell in question, challenging him to interpret it. With no choice, Decalain scans the spell. His comprehension kicks in, devouring 1,700 mana in an instant. The answer comes effortlessly. It's a bewitchment-type barrier spell, designed to trap anyone within the dormitory. Ephraim reels. He answered so quickly, too quickly. Could he actually be competent? No. Impossible. With that, Decalain dismisses her. The system pings, awarding him his store currency for completing the side quest. He walks away as the students whisper among themselves, Ephraim's attempt to discredit him having backfired spectacularly. Later we find Ephraim in the university's magic tower cafeteria, aggressively stabbing her meal. She had planned to expose Decalain, only to become the laughingstock of the class. The shame is unbearable, but she still refuses to believe him. Bewitchment magic is notoriously complex, requiring specific parameters, yet Decalain declared it with certainty and no details. It had to be a bluff. Then one of her friends rushes in, breathless with excitement. You were right to ask him. We finally confirmed it. The spell is a barrier-type bewitchment spell. Professor Decalain was spot on. Ephraim's blood runs cold. No, it can't be. The timing was just a coincidence. A lucky guess, right? But as her friend gushes over Decalain's brilliance and thanks Ephraim for bringing it up, she's left alone with a terrifying thought. What if Decalain is actually as skilled as they say? No, she won't accept it. She can't accept it. Because if he's truly that brilliant, then everything she's lived for, her revenge, her hatred, has been for nothing. And that That would be the cruelest twist of all. Ephraim's frustration only deepens. Instead of exposing Decalain, she unintentionally elevated his status. Now thanks to her, everyone is convinced he's a brilliant professor. The injustice of it gnaws at her. Determined to find a chink in his armor, she pores over a document detailing his so-called accomplishments. After all, there's an old saying, know your enemy as well as yourself, and you'll never lose. She steels herself. If she has to endure this fraud every day, she'll make sure to shatter his reputation beyond repair. Meanwhile, Decalain is busy reeling from his near disaster in the lecture hall. His comprehension skill had activated the moment he laid eyes on that spell. The intricate symbols, the tangled structure, it was a labyrinth of mana that drained every last drop of his reserves. And the worst part? Even after paying that price, he still couldn't fully grasp what the spell actually was. If he'd had double the mana, would it have made a difference? Probably not. But for now, things had miraculously worked in his favor. And that was good enough. Just as he lets out a breath of relief, his path is blocked by a woman in pristine white knight armor. Decalain recognizes her immediately, Julie von de Afreden, his supposed fiancée. He's seen her countless times while developing the game, though he hadn't expected to run into her this early. Decalain, she greets, her voice measured. Julie? He responds smoothly, offering a nonchalant smile. I'm doing fine, thanks for asking. Julie isn't buying it. Fine? Her golden eyes narrow. After breaking our promise? Wu Jin internally winces. Promise? What promise? He has no idea what she's talking about. Wanting to avoid unnecessary drama, he waves it off. I don't recall making any promises, he says, attempting to sidestep her. Julie, unimpressed, blocks his path again. You ran away last time, you're not running this time. Great. She's serious about this. Realizing he won't escape so easily, he lets out a long-suffering sigh. Forgive me, I've been ill. My memory's a bit hazy. Remind me, what exactly did I promise? Julie's expression darkens and the scene flashes back to 1 week ago. She had made a heartfelt request. If Decalain would drop his pretenses, abandon his arrogance, and be honest with himself, she would stand by him, even if the world turned against him. Back in the present, Julie's eyes glisten with the sting of betrayal. She wonders if she placed her faith in the wrong person. With a heavy heart, she steps aside. Go, she mutters. Decalain, instead of asking what's wrong, simply walks past her. Typical. That infuriating nonchalance, she hates it. Their engagement was never about love. It was a political arrangement, orchestrated to unite two powerful noble bloodlines, the Greyhanuklines and the Deafridens. Decalain, a supposed genius mage, and Julie, a prodigious knight, were meant to be a force to be reckoned with. But the illusion shattered quickly. Decalain's talent was a lie, a carefully curated image that had since crumbled. Once the youngest and most promising professor, he had since stagnated. Rumors spread. Whispers of his decline turned into headlines. The noble houses did their best to suppress the gossip, but Julie? She couldn't stand the deception. She had accepted a loveless engagement, but she refused to be bound to a fraud. And yet, when she confronted him a week ago, he had agreed to change to be truthful. Now it was clear to her. That promise? A complete farce. Meanwhile, Decalain heads toward the Imperial University's magic tower, taking in the grandeur of the campus. The meticulously maintained gardens, the sprawling courtyards, it's a testament to the tireless effort he and his team put into world building. Too bad he's stuck experiencing it through this body instead of someone else's. Then he senses something off. Someone's following him. Turning swiftly, he collides with a small figure, sending papers flying. It takes him a second to realize it's Alan, his ever-loyal assistant, who was carrying an armload of documents. After collecting himself, Alan finally presents the reason for his rush, a sponsorship list for this year's new mages. The Magic Tower, much like real-world research institutions, thrives on funding. Professors choose students to sponsor, determining who receives financial support and magical resources. Decalain flips through the profiles, but one name immediately catches his eye. It's highlighted in shimmering gold, an effect he recognizes instantly as the result of his wealthy magnate attribute. Wealthy magnate allows him to instinctively sense financial potential. Combined with sharp eyesight and ability that lets him perceive detailed information about mana, attributes, and hidden factors, it makes him an unrivaled judge of value. The golden glow is clear. This student is destined for success. A walking gold mine. But when he sees the name, his expression freezes. Ephraim Luna, the same girl who is actively plotting his downfall. Out of all the candidates, she is the one brimming with potential? Decalain quickly checks the rest of the list. There are a few other promising names, but none shine as brightly as Ephraim's. Fascinated, he asks Alan why she lacks a sponsor. Alan hesitates before answering. Well, no one wants to risk angering you, sir. That makes sense. No professor in their right mind would support the one person who openly despises him. Still, Decalain can't deny her talent. Despite never attending the academy and learning magic entirely through self-study, her capabilities are undeniable. Her potential is limitless. But she's also his enemy, or rather he is hers. If things continue as they did in the game's original storyline, Destined knows exactly how this ends, with his death. After all, the game had made sure of that. His villain's fate attribute ensures that the world itself is against him. He is doomed to be hated, hunted, and ultimately killed. Whether by sword, poison, or assassination, the method doesn't matter. His death is a foregone conclusion. Yet there is one loophole. Villain's fate may doom him, but the longer he survives, the stronger he becomes. Every attempt on his life that fails only makes him harder to kill, which means his only chance at survival is to make different choices, to act in ways the original Destined never would, to flip the script entirely. With that in mind, Destined makes his decision. He sponsors Ephraim. The irony isn't lost on him, funding the very person who wants him dead, but if she's a goldmine of potential, then he's going to make sure he profits from it first. Signing the documents with a practiced flourish, he hands them to Alan. Submit these. Oh, and while you're at it, fetch me a few books on manipulation magic. Later, alone in his office, Destined leans back in his chair, calculating. Money isn't just a luxury, it's survival. Most of the deadly scenarios waiting for him can be solved with a well-placed bribe, a secured fortress, or an escape plan backed by an obscene amount of wealth. Investing in a prodigy like Ephraim is just the start. He needs more. More money, more power, more security. But power is a tricky thing. Unlike money, he can't just conjure it out of thin air. Destined, despite all his bluster, was never a prodigy. His raw talent is embarrassingly average. If he doesn't find a way to improve, he's a walking corpse. Fortunately, he has something even better than talent, attributes. While Destined can't control all four elements like he claims, he does have an affinity for earth and fire. Combining them with his talent in manipulating metal, he unlocks his unique attribute Midas Touch. It consumes mana to enhance the latent potential of an object, whether it's gold, weapons, or even people. He also has another ace up his sleeve, telekinetic blades. While it sounds grand, in reality, it's just refined metal manipulation. Telekinesis isn't a widely known or practiced magic in this world, making it an unusual advantage. If he masters even basic manipulation magic, he can turn his lackluster combat skills into something terrifyingly effective. So he tests it. Activating his comprehension skill, he devours every word of the book on telekinesis. His mind absorbs the principles instantly. Picking up a pen, he focuses, and it lifts into the air. No incantation, no effort, just sheer mastery. Thanks to his memorize attribute, he can cast the spell flawlessly without ever needing to recite it again. Right now, his ability is basic, but he can already feel the potential. If he pushes further, he could create something truly unstoppable. But raw magic isn't enough. He needs a permanent edge. That's when the idea strikes him: magic circles. In this world, the larger a magic circle, the more powerful it becomes. What if he engraved them onto his body? It's a risky gamble. The process could overload his system, causing irreversible damage. But this is where his Iron Man attribute comes into play. His body is built to withstand extreme strain, meaning if anyone can pull this off, it's him. He begins the engraving. Instantly, excruciating pain sears through him. It's as if his bones are fracturing, his muscles being torn apart from the inside out. Every fiber of his being screams in protest. But Destined does not make a sound. Nobles do not whimper. They endure. When the pain finally subsides, he examines his handiwork. It's incomplete. He ran out of mana before he could finish. But a single magic circle now sits on his shoulder, proof of his progress. At this rate, it will take 2 weeks to fully engrave his body. Time skips forward. A month has passed since Destined's seminar, and now the first official day of lectures at the university's magic tower has arrived. The students gather in the remote training grounds, expecting their professor to guide them through the complexities of magic. Instead, they are greeted by a notice board. A single message from Destined reads, "Test your own abilities. You have the environment. Prove yourselves." The students are stunned. Their professor is making them study on their own? Ephraim, of course, is livid. As she grumbles under her breath, a girl suddenly bumps into her, intentionally and without apology. Already irritated, Ephraim turns to confront the offender only for her breath to hitch in shock. Sylvia von Josephine Lad. The two girls lock eyes, but Sylvia merely walks past as if Ephraim is nothing more than a speck of dust in her way. The encounter shakes Ephraim more than she cares to admit. She knows exactly who Sylvia is. 10 years ago, House Elaide sent their troops to surround Ephraim's manor, fearing her potential. They threatened her family, forcing them into ruin. And yet Sylvia is acting as though she doesn't recognize her at all. Fury simmers in Ephraim's chest, but she forces herself to focus. She has work to do. Channeling her energy, she begins constructing a magic formation only for the structure to suddenly destabilize. A heavy pressure suffocates the air around her. She looks up just in time to see Sylvia conjuring a structure so massive, so perfectly formed, that it makes her own spell seem like a child's scribbles. The turbulence from Sylvia's magic completely disrupts Ephraim's formation. The sheer disrespect of it, the audacity to not even acknowledge her, is infuriating. Ephraim's hands curl into fists. If Sylvia won't recognize her willingly, then she'll force her to. She steps forward, voice laced with venom. Still as pathetic as ever, I see. Sylvia finally turns, her expression one of mild curiosity rather than recognition. I'm sorry, do I know you? The words hit harder than any insult. Ephraim seethes. Sylvia knows exactly who she is. This feigned ignorance is just another way to trample on her. But then Sylvia tilts her head. Ah, you must be that girl. I heard about your father. A tragic end for a negligent noble. Silence. The words slice into Ephraim like a dagger. Her father negligent? Something snaps. Without thinking, she lunges, fist crackling with magic. Sylvia barely has time to react before Ephraim's attack collides with her barrier, sending shockwaves rippling through the field. Students stumble as wind blasts through them. When the dust settles, Ephraim has Sylvia by the collar, eyes burning with fury. Say that again. But before she can deliver another strike, something shifts in the air. A strange, ominous darkness unfurls in the distance. The students turn, panic spreading like wildfire. In the exact spot where Ephraim and Sylvia's mana clashed, something unnatural is forming, a rupture in space itself, an abyss swirling with chaotic energy. Ephraim's grip on Sylvia loosens as realization dawns. They've created a void. The air grows thick with fear. If the void expands, it could trigger an explosion, sending shards of magic-infused metal flying like deadly shrapnel. It could decimate the entire training ground. The students begin to scream. Even Ephraim, blinded by rage just moments ago, understands the gravity of the situation. They've just set off a magical catastrophe. The space-devouring void continues to expand, consuming everything in its path. Ephraim struggles to contain it, pushing her magic to its limits. Then silence. The weight of the distortion vanishes. She opens her eyes to find a towering figure standing before them, clad in pristine, noble attire. Their professor, Destined. His sudden arrival is shocking, but what truly leaves the students speechless is the effortless way he stops the catastrophe. With a flick of his wrist, ice magic freezes the deadly fragments mid-air. Then in a mesmerizing display, he uses telekinesis to carefully maneuver the shards into harmless clusters. The raw beauty of magic in motion leaves even Ephraim momentarily entranced. The crisis neutralized, Destined turns his attention to the stunned students. Class dismissed, he announces coolly. But as the crowd begins to disperse, his gaze locks onto the two responsible for the near catastrophe. Except for you two, Ephraim's stomach drops. This is bad. Very, very bad. The interrogation room is an imposing space, lined with bookshelves and cold, judgmental eyes. Destined sits at the head of the table, exuding an air of lazy authority. Seated beside him is Adeline Sigelian, the chairwoman of the university, her presence alone enough to silence a room. Two other professors are present: Retlin, head of spirit studies, and Relin, head of support magic. They aren't here for small talk. The moment Ephraim is ushered in, she can already tell how this will go. The professors barely conceal their disdain. Sylvia, daughter of one of the most powerful noble houses, is the obvious victim. And Ephraim, a fallen noble with no backing? She might as well be the villain of the story. The meeting begins, and Relin is the first to strike. His voice booms through the room as he reprimands Ephraim for endangering the lives of her peers. Had it not been for Professor Destined's intervention, this would have been a disaster. Ephraim remains silent. She can't tell them the real reason for the fight. Not in front of him. Her silence only makes things worse. Do you have nothing to say for yourself? Relin snaps. Ephraim clenches her fists. She wants to yell, to expose Sylvia for what she said, but that would only play into their hands. If she speaks carelessly, her long-term goal will be jeopardized. Instead, she endures the humiliation, biting back her rage. Sylvia, ever the perfect noble, finally speaks. I take responsibility for damaging Ephraim's work. It was an accident, but I understand that it led to tensions. Her words are measured, each one crafted to paint herself as the reasonable party. A perfect deflection. The professors nod in approval. Then Ephraim's attack was not only reckless, but irrational, Relin concludes. Her inability to control her emotions makes her a danger to the student body. I recommend immediate expulsion. Ephraim freezes. This is it. The end. She feels it all closing in, the weight of the world's judgment, the suffocating certainty that she has no allies in this room. No support. No one to speak on her behalf. Until I disagree. The room falls into stunned silence. Decolain leans back in his chair, completely unbothered by the disbelief written on everyone's faces. Sylvia had the means to prevent this incident from escalating, and yet she did nothing. I'd like to know why. Sylvia stiffens. She wasn't expecting this. Neither was Ephraim. Even Relin, who had been moments away from signing Ephraim's expulsion, frowns in confusion. Professor Decolain, surely you're not suggesting— I'm suggesting, Decolain interrupts smoothly, that a noble of the esteemed Elad family, known for their exceptional talent, failed to de-escalate a confrontation she herself instigated. Curious, isn't it? Sylvia's breath catches in her throat. She starts, then stops. For the first time, genuine hesitation flickers across her face. Finally, with no other options, she lowers her head. I'm allowed the situation to escalate, she admits. I wanted Ephraim to get into trouble. Murmurs ripple through the room. The professors exchange glances, taken aback by the admission. Adeline, ever composed, clasps her hands together. So, you provoked the incident intentionally. Sylvia swallows hard. Yes. Decolain tilts his head. And you expect no consequences? Sylvia's fingers curl in her lap. She doesn't answer. Relin, however, is quick to intervene. Regardless, the primary aggressor was still— Decolain sighs, cutting him off. If I may remind you, as the professor overseeing this class, I failed to provide a structured lesson plan, which led to an uncontrolled environment. Shouldn't I be the one to take responsibility? Relin looks utterly flabbergasted. That's absurd. Ephraim is just as dumbfounded. Is he steamrolling another professor to protect her? After a pause, Adeline finally speaks. I don't see this as a matter severe enough for disciplinary action. Conflicts between students are inevitable. This one simply got out of hand. She clasps her hands together. Therefore, I see no reason to pursue punishment. You are both free to go. Ephraim blinks. She was bracing for expulsion, for everything to end here. But somehow, some way, Decolain had flipped the entire narrative. Why? As the meeting adjourns, Relin begrudgingly acknowledges Decolain's unique handling of the situation, though he doesn't look happy about it. But Ephraim isn't thinking about him. She's staring at Decolain, the man she spent years hating, as a realization begins to take root in her mind. Something doesn't add up. This isn't how things were supposed to go. After the meeting, she calls out to him, finally mustering the resolve to ask the question that's been clawing at her insides. Professor Decolain, she starts, voice carefully measured. Do you recognize the name Luna? His expression doesn't change, but Ephraim doesn't miss the flicker of something behind his eyes. And in that moment, she knows. He remembers. He knows exactly who she is. Ephraim refuses to back down. She watches Decolain closely, waiting for a reaction, some flicker of guilt, anything to confirm that he remembers what he did to her father. Is he going to deny it? Twist the narrative to protect himself? Worse, what if he doesn't remember at all? The thought chills her more than the prospect of expulsion ever could. But Decolain simply exhales, his gaze cool and unreadable. Dwelling on the past only hinders your growth, he says, voice calm but firm. You do well to focus on the present. And with that, he turns and walks away. Ephraim's breath catches. That wasn't a denial. If he truly had no idea who she was, he would have dismissed her outright. But he didn't. He chose to help her, despite knowing exactly who she was. Did he feel guilty? Was this some twisted attempt at atonement? Whatever the reason, she takes solace in one thing he hasn't forgotten. A grim sort of satisfaction settles in her chest. As long as he remembers, she can live with this. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a notification ticks in, +2 points to death prevention. Meanwhile, across the city, Sylvia von Illide stands before her father, Giltian Illide, head of the prestigious Illide family and a renowned Esper mage. She recounts the incident in full detail, her voice measured, hiding the shame she still feels from Decolain's unexpected intervention. Giltian listens with mild amusement. Ephraim Luna, he muses. That girl's path as a mage was sealed off years ago. She's hardly a threat. Sylvia remains silent, but she knows better. 10 years ago, at the Imperial Aptitude exam, she and Ephraim had stood side by side for the first time. The manometer had gone wild in their presence, detecting immeasurable magical potential in both girls. It was a declaration either of them could ascend to the rank of Archmage, the most powerful class of mage in existence. To put it into perspective, Archmages aren't just prestigious figures, they are forces of nature. Emperors fear them, kingdoms rise and fall at their command, and history carves their names into eternity. Tradition dictates that each era will see only 3 rise to this rank. Of the current generation, One seat has already been claimed by Demerkin, a name spoken with reverence across the continent. That leaves 2 spots. Adeline Sigelian, chairwoman of the university, is a likely candidate for the second. But the third? That is still undecided. The Iliad and Luna families had once stood as rivals, both vying for the final Archmage throne. But in the end, the Alades won. Sylvia's father made sure of that. Giltian had crushed Ephorine's father, stripping him of everything, ensuring that Ephorine would never receive the education or resources to reach her full potential. He had orchestrated it so that Sylvia would have no true competition. It wasn't just a family's pride at stake, it was fate. Sylvia knows this. She accepts this. And yet, Ephorine's mere existence still rattles her. That's why she provoked her at the academy. That's why she wanted to see her fail. She doesn't say this aloud. Instead, she simply nods. I was careless, she admits. Giltian waves a dismissive hand. It doesn't matter. The girl lost her opportunity long ago. But Sylvia isn't so sure. Especially after witnessing Professor Decalaine. His intervention wasn't simple luck. He hadn't just diffused the fight, he had understood her trap. When she manipulated Ephorine's mana, she had created a secondary trigger, a carefully laid spell that would escalate the conflict further, ensuring Ephorine's downfall. No one should have noticed. No one could have noticed. Yet Decalaine had, and instead of exposing her, he had subtly redirected the course of events, offering a third path, a silent warning to both of them. The professor was far more dangerous than she had anticipated. A few days later, Decalaine finds himself back at his manor, living what can only be described as a luxurious existence. He's basically Bruce Wayne with magic at this point. Everything is immaculate, his staff is efficient, and his wardrobe is fit for a king. But even as he enjoys the comforts of his estate, he's preoccupied with the recent turn of events. Supporting Ephorine was the right move. He's eliminated a major death route and even earned some store currency in the process. But there's a catch. Now he's drawn Sylvia's ire too. Decalaine exhales, pinching the bridge of his nose. He really doesn't have time to deal with another vengeful noble. But as always, the game demands his attention. A new side quest pops up. Attend the Flower of the New Year Gala. Reward, +0.5 store currency. He groans. Social events aren't exactly his forte, but he needs those points. He still requires at least 5 to access the shop's higher tier items. So for now, he's prioritizing interactions with the main characters. The gala is as extravagant as expected. Nobles draped in silks, expensive laughter filling the air, and a sea of egos on display. Decalaine moves through the crowd, already spotting multiple named characters from the game. But one in particular stands out. Ihelm, a royal palace mage, a monarch-ranked spellcaster, and an old university rival of Decalaine's. The two had once been on equal footing, but when Decalaine rose to become head professor of the Magic Tower, Ihelm's jealousy festered into something ugly. And now, here he is, smirking like a man about to start trouble. Well, Ihelm drawls. I wasn't sure you'd show up, Decalaine. I thought you had abandoned social events altogether. Decalaine offers a dry smile. Tragic, isn't it? Ihelm leans in, voice dropping. I've heard some interesting rumors lately, that your research has stalled, that you're losing your edge. The implication is clear. Ihelm is trying to undermine him, to plant seeds of doubt in the nobles around them. Decalaine doesn't take the bait. Fascinating, he muses. Tell me, Ihelm, is there a reason you're so concerned with my career, or are you just a particularly well-dressed gossip? Ihelm's smirk tightens. He isn't used to being dismissed so easily. Decalaine, however, has already lost interest. Because across the room, standing on the upper floor, he spots her, Ganesha, one of the most powerful adventurers in the game. A woman with enough strength to shatter mountains. His real target for the evening. Decalaine moves to intercept, but just as he's about to reach her, Ihelm steps into his path again, determined to waste more of his time. Annoyed, Decalaine brushes past him. Out of my way, rotten cheese. Ihelm blinks, caught completely off guard. What did you just call me? Decalaine doesn't answer. He's already ascending the stairs, his sights locked on Ganesha. And just as he's about to call out to her, she speaks first. Professor Decalaine. His breath stills. She was already watching him.